What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another replay cast here on HeroesHearth Warcraft 3. My name is Kendric, and as always, it is my pleasure to bring you guys two outstanding European players duking it out here on Concealed Hill. On the one hand side, we have LiiLD.C, a player from France, quite the powerhouse here on the Night Elves, and his opponent in this matchup will be none other than Cash, Russian expert on almost any race, you could say. He's definitely one of the best random players that we have here, but he decided to go with Orc this time around. And on Concealed Hill, of course, that makes for some interesting matchups here. Orc versus Night Elf. So many styles can be played, especially recently. I think the meta hasn't really been what it's or as stale as it used to be, with the Keeper no longer being the shining superstar that dominates the Orc from start to finish. We see a little bit of variety in the hero choices. Even Farseers are being deployed by the Orcs these days sometimes. On Concealed Hill, though, I think that is rather unlikely, yet not impossible. Of course, the smaller the map is, the more impactful a Farseer can be. The Keeper is being deployed here as it is quite to be expected. And we see the Blade Master here, so already the good old heroes, the trusty old veterans are being deployed once again, though. But also in terms of army compositions, of course, the Night Elf versus Orc matchup has seen a lot of variety once again. You know, you have Talons as an option. You have Mass Tier 1 that the Night Elf players can deploy. You can also go Bears. You can go Mountain Giants. There's really hardly anything that the Night Elf players can't do against Orcs. And Orcs, on the other hand, of course, have their own counters to the respective builds. We had recently a really cool matchup on our fight night here between Spiral, Orc player from Germany, and Neutron, his Night Elven adversary. I would definitely like you to check that out if you're in for some hot action. Definitely didn't disappoint that series, I can tell you that much. Here we go, the Keeper goes through. Has to be on either a creeping or a harassing mission. Most Night Elf players these days, they like to go for a little bit of creeping early, you know, get some cheeky items here. Circle of Nobility, always a welcome sight, you know, gives you +2 in all the departments, a little bit of tankiness, a little bit of damage, and of course a little bit of additional armor too. So definitely a good start. On the flip side, we see the Blade Master going through with a Ring of Protection +3. And as many people like to laugh about those rings still, on certain heroes, either heroes like the Alchemist who have very low innate armor, or on heroes like the Blade Master who have high hero armor to begin with, these things can actually be really good for protection, obviously, but also, you know, to help bait a little bit of focus fire onto your heroes. There's hardly anything that's crippling you more in a team fight than, let's say, wasted seconds, wasted momentum that you're using on a hero to kill him or her, only to fail at doing so and losing most of your army in the process. So yeah, you know what? Don't sleep on the rings. Great value from these items to be seen. Of course, it gets a little bit frustrating when you get several of these. You know, let's say we've had games in the fight night on Heroes Hearth where we had +10 armor because of +3, +3, +4. It's just crazy, the amount of rings that can drop on maps these days. Really nice scouting, though, from Cash's Blade Master coming through here with a Windwalk just in time to also trigger the healing and mana replenishment, so the Keeper couldn't interrupt it. We see a Tier 2 tech already halfway through on the Orcish side. And let's check out the Night Elves, because I think Night Elves are almost dictating the pace of the matchup here many, many times. You know, when there is Mass Tier 1, the Orc player has to be careful and respond accordingly. If there's a faster tech or a fast expansion, the Orc player has to respond to this threat as well. And that's what sometimes players like Neutron, or why they say that Night Elves still have a slight edge in this matchup, because the Orc has to respond, and the Orc has to avoid making mistakes at any given point. If you lose too many grunts, like Cash, for example, is demonstrating here on unintentionally, of course, you might actually be crippled so hard that your transition into the mid to late game is going to be very hard to do. For now, though, of course, because of that entangle, Cash knows exactly where LiiLD.C is currently spending his time creeping. And if he was to steal a little bit of experience, maybe even the item from the Rock Golem, that could already be a big thing, but he knows that it's probably going to take too long for LiiLD.C to finish this creep spot without him being revealed and the Windwalk expiring. So great stuff coming here with a cheeky archer kill. Always good value. And you know what? On top of that, he also prevented LiiLD.C from creeping this spot altogether. So that's already a nice little win here for the Orc player, for Cash. Shadow Hunter coming through, standard stuff. Berserker Strength, of course, to boost these grunts quite a bit here. Speaking of grunts, there's only currently 2 available. Might want to pump that up to 3 or 4. depending on how quickly he wants to make the tech transition, how many resources he wants to spend in the course of doing so. Preemptive dust of appearance, by the way. You always have to expect a cheeky invisible Blade Master being nearby, so I love this preemptive dusting. In that case, of course, wasn't successful, but already the Blade Master just arriving a little bit too late. Could go for that train here for additional XP to just get that out of the way. Shadow Melt here, really well used. Prevents the archers from taking damage. No dust of appearance on the side of Cash this time, unfortunately. Yeah, just tries to be cheeky and maybe, you know, maybe deny the level 3 for the Keeper. It gets it with a crit. Very nicely done. But there is still the High Priest. And the High Priest, of course, will do the inevitable at the will do the inevitable and provide that level 3. Beastmaster coming through. Ladies and gentlemen, we're already shying away from the standard meta that we're used to seeing from the Night Elves. No Alchemist second, no Demon Hunter second, it is the Beastmaster. So going for full summons against Orcs, that can actually be a legit strategy. You know, Orcs kind of struggling, especially when there's no Spirit Walkers, which, to be fair, there is none. So it was either scouted very well by LiiLD.C or well researched for, or sometimes, but don't tell them too much, just, you know, well RNG'd. So sometimes you just go for lucky punches and hope your opponent doesn't build for the counter. And without AoE Dispel, without a Torrent Totem, I don't think there is much the Orc player will be able to do against all those summons. Of course, there is the way to go Shamans in the Spirit Lodge, which is actually the more standard meta response. But I'm not sure if the Beastmaster was taken accounted for, you know. So great individual Dispel, but once there's several Treants and maybe some Quill Beasts and maybe a Spirit Hawk, it's just going to be really tough for all these Shamans with a relatively low mana household to deal with all of those, you know. Speaking of which, here goes the Speed Scroll. Needs to evacuate the perimeter immediately, Cash, that is. Nice body blocks. 2 Quill Beasts here now in the meantime already, but the speed is too fast. And here goes the attack from the Night Elf player. Of course, the primary targets of such an attack should always be the Orc Burrows, the most vulnerable buildings in the base layout. Human players like to do that a lot with Water Elementals, you know, these timed pushes, very nicely done. By the way, with that Dispel onto the Entangled Grunt. And that really shows you the value of the Shamans, but that's also something else they need to be taken account into for. You know, they also need to take care of the Entangle. So mana, I think, could be a big problem for those Shamans. Getting also focused down by those Quill Beasts. Another one falls right there. Great micro coming in from LiiLD.C, who, on the other hand, is chasing down a Grunt there as well. Serpent Wars, though, really helping to hold the ground, to let that base... to not let that base falter too much. See another Quill Beast going down here. LiiLD.C with relentless attacks. Ultimately, I think he came out on top, because losing an Archer for a Grunt is always a good trade for the Night Elf player. He didn't really take too much damage either. And here go the Druids of the Talon, by the way. We mentioned this earlier. Talons are kind of back in the meta. Some players, especially in Europe, I feel they like to use them quite frequently. Talons, of course, you need to have a critical mass. You know, with just 2 or 3 Talons, you can not really hope to win a fight against an Orcish force in the mid-late game. By the way, we see a nice baiting attempt here on the Ogre Lord. Now a body block next to the Tavern. Doesn't manage to close the gap, though, but with a Purge and the movement speed slow that results in it, maybe Cash can do it. No, quite sloppy execution here. And now the Night Elf player with the illusion here sees exactly what Cash was trying to do so and keeps those creeps awake and in action for now. I think at this point Cash knows that it's not the real Keeper. The illusions take way more damage than the original one. But this is going to be a really intense struggle around the most powerful creep camp on the map, you know. Drop big fat items, oftentimes items that can decide the course of a match, you know, if you get a big aura out of these. I guess for Orcs, the Archmage aura, the pipe might always be good. But you know what? He's not going to say no to the Ancient Django, basically providing him with a bonus of a Torrent Chieftain, which normally I don't think we would have seen anyways. Or, if he had planned to go for a Torrent Chieftain, he can now consider going for a different hero, unless he really wants to have the Stomp, which against Night Elves can sometimes be really valuable, especially when they mass these squishy little units in the back. Tinker, speaking of heroes, by the way, has been deployed here, and this is a common theme, you know, with Night Elves. Later on in the game, when they go mass squishy ranged units like Archers and Talons, the Tinker, while he may not be the tankiest member or the tankiest unit on the field himself, he can produce pocket factories. And pocket factories with those little goblins, they take out quite a little bit of space and they provide melee texture to a team fight. So they absorb a little bit of damage and buy enough time for the ranged units on the Night Elf side to deal with things. Nice Entangle Roots, though, goes onto another Grunt. And I think Cash's numbers, they're not really there yet. He needs to buy more time for more. By the way, we see the Tauren Spirit Walker transition here. Very nicely done. Of course, he now realizes that with a Fairy Fire coming into the battle as well, Fairy Fire reducing armor and granting visibility on affected units, you need to have some counters. Some AoE Dispel is in order. And as such, I think the Tauren Totem is a very good decision. Now we see some Headhunters coming through. Additional piercing damage against the casters in the back. They also take reduced damage from the archers, of course, which is nice to have. And you can see these little pocket factory clockworks, they do so much. You know, they not only just provide a little bit of tankiness, but they also deal significant damage if left unchecked. And the most difficult thing to handle about this pocket factory is the sheer number of which it can produce. You know, these clockworks at some point are going to prove some serious obstacles. Here we go. Another cheeky entangle catches a Headhunter, which is the golden target, of course. Very squishy target. Very nicely done. The Serpent Wars, though, a nice additional defense line. An additional tower is also being produced right now from Cash, who really doesn't seem to be giving in that easily. And, I mean, he has the tools ready right now, you know, to keep the Night Elfin army at bay. But I think also, on the other hand, LiiLD.C is doing a really good job building up an Ancient of Wanderers, providing additional healing and mana regeneration if needed. The altar seems to be the first target of focus. Of course, just buys a little bit more space, you know, to spread out the concave, to dive a little bit deeper into the Orc base. 2 pocket factories now available at the same time, by the way. That's how undisturbed the Tinker has been so far. Now the Blade Master, though, trying to go for a flanking maneuver. Maybe hits on the already weakened Beastmaster could be quite rewarding. But, oh man, he's got a Potion of Greater Healing too. Needs to be considered. And the Altar of Storms is still standing strong. The Raiders are just waiting to get their ensnares on some exposed targets, like the Beastmaster. Is he going to use the healing potion in time? LiiLD.C already a little bit with a blunder there. That's one of the big frontliners now gone. No more Quill Beasts, no more additional tanking, but I think he's using that time that was used to focus down the Beastmaster to go for something else here. A lot of the units of the Orc are now Fairy Fired, which means they take additional damage because of armor reduction. So much extra damage coming through now. The Talon's greatly untouched, but for now, I think the Orc holds strong. Dropping some aggressive Serpent Wards, always great to see. A little bit of additional mana regeneration. And the question is, for LiiLD.C, is he going to buy back the Beastmaster, or is he going to rebuild it at the altar? Looks like the altar is the choice. So it's going to take a little bit longer, of course, for that hero to reinforce the front line once again. Nice staff into the Tinker, took some dangerous damage already. And with these Spirit Walkers, I think there's not really a lot these Talons can do for too long. Of course, Master Upgrade is here now. The Cyclones are spreading, keeping the Blade Master the biggest threat with crits and dangerous auto-attack damage out of the fight for as long as possible. And at this point, LiiLD.C is at the brink of getting defeated here with his army, taking more and more damage, and the Orc defender Cash has done a really good job. Even great micro here on the Raider prevents it from dying to the shop, which would have been a little bit of a blunder there. And yeah, the Orc player holds. Not even losing the Altar of the Storms can be repaired now by peons. The reinforced upgrades, by the way, so huge on the tower, so huge on the burrows, which, by the way, he still has 4 peons in. Pretty sure he's going to take care of that in due time. And now I think the Orc army has reached a power level that is to be respected by the Night Elf player. You know, there's a bunch of Raiders who are great against all those squishy units, even deal extra damage onto the Talons too. There is a level 3, soon to be level 4 Shadow Hunter, which means more dangerous snakes and stronger healing waves. Level 4 is probably the best level up you can hope for the Shadow Hunter, especially against Night Elves when they have this mass Talon style. We see a Potion of Invul on the Blade Master, very important. Healing Scroll. I think these items might, the Healing Scroll at least, might be transferred over to the Shadow Hunter, because as you could see in the previous engagement, there was a lot of focus with the Cyclone onto the Blade Master so that he couldn't use anything. Of course, he does have Dispel from the Spirit Walkers and the Shamans, but that's already going to require additional micro as well. So maybe the Healing Pot or the Healing Scroll onto the Shadow Hunter might make a little bit more sense. Here goes an expansion attempt, by the way, by Cash. Protecting it with a tower and Serpent Wards already. I like that move. We still have some creeps left here at the Goblin Shop, currently taken out by LiiLD.C. Both players are gearing up for the next big fight here, in my opinion. Look at how many Talons. It's actually crazy. And you know what? The Hawk is now providing constant reveal onto invisible units. That's another reason why the Beastmaster is so efficient against Blade Masters and all things invisible, because of that Hawk, of course. Later on, the Hawk is also going to get the ability to shoot magic damage onto ground opponents, of course. Very useful. especially against Spirit Walkers when they decide to go into ethereal form. The Hawk can always go for that. Look at that Cyclone, man. Against heroes, it takes a rather short amount of time, but against units, it keeps them trapped for so long. And with the amount of talents, I think he could actually just make a surgical strike, take out the most important units into a Cyclone, like the Shadow Hunter right now, and just try to brute force the Night Elven way through. The Pocket Factory is still uncontested, still producing those little clockworks. We see so many Serpent Wards, though. The Serpent Wards, 30 damage per shot. They're tearing this Night Elf backline apart if left uncontested. For now, though, the Orcish heroes are kind of in trouble. They're trying to hero nuke down this Keeper of the Grove, who still has a TP scroll. So at this point, the Orc player just wants to force the Night Elf out of here to make enough space to create a lot of time for this expansion to go down. And he does so successfully. Really good and important move by Cash to keep his second base alive. And if that one goes through, we're going to find ourselves in this awkward, unusual state of the game where the Orc actually out-expands or out-bases a Night Elven opponent when it should be the other way around normally. But I think LiiLD.C is so focused, he's so set to really make this one base strategy with tons of stuff work. His supply is skyrocketing right now, you know? His supply is so huge, 50 out of 50 compared to 50 out of 60, though. I mean, it just looks bigger, right? Because all of these units don't consume a lot of food. So I just looked at this army and I was like, that has to be more than 50, but here we go. That's the power of massing cheap units. Could also be his downfall, though, if the Orc just gets stronger units out on the board, if the Orc just builds up more time, more upgrades, and most importantly, the expansion, you know, which will allow the Orc player to do all these sweet things. Fairy Dragon coming through against the casters, by the way, in the back. I don't think he's going to mass the fairies, just have like 2 or 3 in the back, and then in shapeshift form provide hefty damage whenever a Spirit Walker uses a spell, whenever a hero or a shaman uses a spell. And here we go. This could be the big fight, guys. We see a relatively nice concave on the backline here for the Night Elf player with a Pocket Factory well protected. Invul and the Beastmaster tries to go on the Tinker now. Cash, that is. Is he going to make that Tinker fall? Yes. But Blade Master also exposed and in danger. Dies in the Entangle, although the level up was there to save him a little bit. No more mana on this on the Shadow Hunter. Uses a Clarity right now, but will he have enough time? The Greater Healing, by the way, on the Shadow Hunter, not on the Blaze. He could have used that one really, really well, of course. But now 2 towers with building armor. Structural armor is going to provide so much additional damage. Nice focus fire onto these unarmored Druids of the Talons in the back. The fight is still raging on, though. The Kodo barely protected, still under the effect of Fairy Fire. Will it fall right now? I think it will. Double level up for the Night Elf player. Level 4 Beastmaster, level 5 Keeper of the Grove. That's going to be a big one. Reinforcements from behind. Treants now melting the backline of the Orc player, but these towers, the MVPs, the big match winners, question mark. No more focus fire on those towers. He can't even bring them down. 5 peons are repairing. And these Talons, they're all going to say goodbye. They have no more time, no more duration left in their life here. And look at these low HP Orc units to be saved. They're desperately by Cash. And he's managing to save 1. And only the heroes left. Only 2 Talons. The towers, the unshakable force here at Cash's side. And ladies and gentlemen, that's why you build those towers at the expansion, and that's why you don't just leave it unprotected. Entangle coming through, though. Level 4 Shadow Hunter. I mean, Cash may have won that fight near the expansion, but his heroes are still overwhelmed by the power of the Night Elven forces right now. The Blade Master needs a little bit of extra time to be reproduced. Maybe if LiiLD.C was to scout and spot how low HP the Altar of the Storms was, he could actually send some units in to maybe focus it down. As it is, though, he's trying to get the production facilities right now. Still no second base for the Night Elf player, or is there? Actually, I take that back. He was building up a second base cheekily in the middle of the map, which has been unscouted so far by, I think, by Cash. So he's using this attack now to maybe get some value, to maybe destroy some production facilities, but most importantly, he's trying to use that assault to buy time for his own expansion. By the way, I love what LiiLD.C was doing with a Hawk here, by the way. Sending it in, preventing or stopping the Orc from healing and replenishing the mana. Now, the big boy Blade is back in the building, though. He's trying to take down that Beastmaster, telling him, I'm the only one who's called BM in this game. Could even go for the Keeper now, honestly. But the Fairy Fire is so good against the Blade Master, can no longer go Invis when this effect is on him. Might get some lucky crits here onto the Keeper, but doesn't manage to bring him down. Whew! That was a close fight because the Blade Master, once again, going dangerously low on health. has a Ring of Regeneration right now. If just, in these moments, it's actually really valuable. But during all of this time, the expansion has been running, and double gold production for the Orc player when there's only one real mining base for the Night Elf player. That's a very dangerous spot to be in. As the Night Elf player, LiiLD.C, with his back against the wall, question mark, his expansion in the middle had been scouted. Now, the other expansion spot, by the way, hasn't even been crept yet, so he was kind of forced to build it there. But against the amount of raiders, the Blade Master and the Shadow Hunter, I don't even think he can get any value from this base. So the Tree of Life, a big investment, barely paying off, not at all. Only 3 Wisps in the Entangled Gold Mine. This was a disaster right now for LiiLD.C, who's still on 1 base now. Uses the Healing Fountain to heal up the hurt units. Is there still Fairy Fire any of those Orc units? I don't think so, honestly, because there's a respectable number of Spirit Walkers right now. I really love the transition, by the way, from Cash to go from Shamans into Spirit Walkers against the Mass Talent style. Super useful, and I think now Cash might try to go for the killing blow here. He finds the Night Elf player, he finds LiiLD.C, gets caught a little bit here. No Entangle coming through. Spirit Walkers taking good care of their leader, of the Blade Master right now. Cheeky cycling here. He might surround a unit here. And I think for LiiLD.C, every unit matters right now, He's pretty respectable hero levels. Level 3, level 5, level 4. And I feel like these 3 heroes with respectable power levels on each, they may be the only chance for LiiLD.C left in this game, because unit composition-wise, I think he's actually getting overpowered slowly but surely with all those raiders, with all the Spirit Walkers. So maybe the strong heroes can turn the tide of battle once more. Headhunters now coming into the mix there as well. Speaking of strong heroes, though, we have a level 5 Shadow Hunter. Because of the early departure of the Blade Master earlier, the Shadow Hunter was soaking experience from the Night Elven forces by himself for a long duration of the previous engagements. The Orc player is producing like crazy. More Kodos, more Headhunters. Does he have the time, though? That's a really unfortunate catch there. The Entangle is huge. Tries to block him in with a Pocket Factory as well. All emergency buttons have to be pressed here for the Blade Master to be saved. Has an Invul, though. Has a Healing Scroll ready. So with the Invul being popped, he can then no longer be Cycloned, and that means he has enough time to pop the Scroll of Healing as well. But once again, unit after unit is getting picked apart by the Stellar Micro from LiiLD.C. Great focus fire here. Once again, goes full ham mode onto the Blade, who pops the Invul Potion right now, is slicing and dicing his way through, is currently being distracted with the heroes. Maybe he should focus his attention a little bit more onto the backline here. Use the Scroll of Healing, a little bit of health being regained. Great Dispel against the Entangle. You can really see what LiiLD.C is trying to do here. Now focuses on a Beastmaster instead. Needs to be careful. Hero focus on both sides right now, because both players realize whoever loses heroes now is likely going to lose the match as well. Fairy Fire, though, doing so much work. It's actually crazy to see how much value this little ability is going to get. All the Night Elven heroes are so dangerous, though. The Beastmaster is falling to the rampage of Cash, who's dropping another crit onto the Keeper. The Blade Master is safe for now, gets a level up for good measure. Level 5, ladies and gentlemen, and that is it. 2 base Orc economy, too strong. LiiLD.C fought valiantly, but Cash, with superior hero focus, with great strategic decisions like building 2 towers with reinforced armor against the Night Elven onslaught. So well done here. 23 minutes of action, non-stop action nonetheless. I really hope you enjoyed this game, guys. If you did, feel free to drop a subscription onto this channel. Leave a comment in the section down below and let us know what matchups you want to see in the future. My name is Kendric. It was a pleasure to bring you this replay. Make sure to tune in next time for more replay cast action and maybe some Fight Night action too on Heroes Hearth. Thank you very much, guys. Peace.